So today I wanted to make a video and talk about what other options do you have besides propane and CO2 for powering your guns. Um, Now most people, if they're looking for a gas gun, one of the things that usually strikes them at some point is I have to pay for gas, and that can get really expensive. I mean, propane isn't so bad, but especially these little CO2 cartridges can get very expensive. Sometimes, I mean, I've seen them for all sorts of prices, from like 50 cents a piece to like over like $1.50 a piece. So these can get pretty expensive. Um, so what do? What if you can't afford that? What are you going to do? You do have some other options, but not many. I came up with a couple. Um, Usually, though, when you're discussing this, most people don't have a gas rifle. They have a gas pistol, and not a spring pistol, and they have an AEG. Um, so it really only applies to pistols most of the time. However, it can also apply to rifles as well. Although for most people, battery power for a rifle is plenty good. However, gas rifles are out there. I have mine and such. But you can also get pistols that are blowback, but they are electric blowback guns. Now, I've never owned one. I can't vouch for how good they are. Um, but from what I can tell, they're all right. They're not going to be as good or as realistic. You're definitely not going to get the same feel of recoil, and usually they're plastic, and well, they're about as good a quality as any Walmart spring gun, from what I hear. Although I'm sure there are some exceptions. So that is a option. A lot of people aren't going to like that option because batteries. It's just not exactly practical for a pistol. Now, as far as a rifle goes, this is really gonna be your best option. As far as like the amount of stuff you got to carry around, the amount of money you got to invest, this is gonna be cheapest. Um, as far as pistols go, gas is probably still your better option. Well, what can you use other than batteries? Well, if you have, I know a lot of people have the Elite Force 1911, and apparently they've improved them since I got this one quite a while ago. But these are only CO2, so they're made to take CO2 only. I'm not a big fan of the magazines, but that's beside the point. So you have to use 12-gram CO2 cartridges that aren't threaded around the top. I personally haven't done this, but I have seen people actually making a refillable cartridge, because if you know, these, once you puncture them, because there's this seal, it leaves a little hole, and once you puncture it, it's basically useless. However, I've seen people drill this out and actually make a valve to stick in there and refill these, because getting bulk CO2, this is propane, but if this were CO2, this would cost very, very little compared to these. Now, obviously, that's not the best option if you're going to be playing all day, because I haven't seen anybody do it well enough to where it doesn't leak. But, if you're just going to be shooting in your backyard, that may not be a bad idea. Another idea that, this is my preferred method, and right here I've got it hooked up to my rifle magazine, is using compressed air. And I know I've talked about this a bit, and actually somebody asked me if I had done it in a pistol, and I have. I don't think I've made a video about that yet, but I'll talk about it at some point. It worked, but not as well as this, probably because when I made it, I didn't make it quite as well. But compressed air is a really good option if you're going to be shooting in your backyard. The problem is you have to have a compressor, and compressors can be expensive, especially because you need at least 80 psi out of it. So, you can't really use a bike pump unless you have like a tank to store it in first. So if you don't have a compressor, and you probably going to want to look at a cheaper option, because compressors can run you even several $100. So not such a good idea if you don't have a compressor. But if you have a shop compressor, this is probably, or at least in my opinion, your best option. Like I said, especially if you're going to be using it just in your backyard or whatever. Now, if you're going to be carrying around the field, you're probably going to want to get an HPA tank and regulator. So that's kind of a bit of a downside. Now, in theory, you could get like a big, lightweight, like really strong plastic tank to go on your back, and it'd probably be good enough for one game, but you'd have to refill it in between. I mean, I guess that's all right. Some fields, I know that X-Zone in Virginia, they have like a scuba tank compressor there, and they will fill up HPA tanks. I don't know if it's a charge or not. It probably is, but you know, that I suppose that's an option. But if you're going to be in your backyard, compressed air, I feel like, is your best way to go. And as I mentioned, it will work in pistols, so that's not bad. I guess it's a little bit, for each gun it's a bit different, so I can't really say, you know, these are the steps you go through and it's gonna be perfect. So yeah, another good option, I feel like it's a good option. It's probably gonna take the least amount of work and effort, is buy a gun like this. This is the KJW 1911. Most of you guys know I really like these, and indeed these can actually take out of the box, you can see the red nozzle in there, these will take propane, green gas, or CO2. So out of the box it comes with a green gas magazine, but they do sell CO2 magazines, so you can shoot it with CO2 or propane / green gas. Or if you do what I did, the threads inside here for that valve are apparently a standard size, and I took a machine screw that was the right size and I drilled out the center of it and made some fittings to go on there, and that works all right for supplying compressed air. However, propane, if you're not tech savvy and you're not a machinist and you don't want to modify stuff, propane is going to be your next best option, because it is bloody dirt cheap. I mean, compared to green gas itself is pretty expensive, even though it's literally just propane mixed with silicone oil. Most people know that. So unfortunately, if you're going to be using propane like this, you need to mix some sort of oil in it, or at least you should, to keep your gun functioning properly. So, you know, this is a good option because these are like a couple bucks and you're going to get a lot of shooting out of it. So, you're not supposed to refill these tanks, but I have seen people on YouTube doing it, from one of those big 20-gallon, I'm sorry, not 20-gallon, 20-pound barbecue tanks. And if you buy it in bulk, I think that U-Haul will sell propane for like $3 a gallon or something like that. It's pretty cheap, and those are like, I think those are like 4-gallon tanks, give or take. So that's pretty cheap. You know, it's not as cheap as compressed air or electricity, but it's cheap. So I hope this video helped you and maybe got you thinking a little bit about what you want to do. Make sure you do your own research, of course, and I hope this video